Hey everybody, welcome to a very special edition of Close to the Heart. I am over the moon excited about this episode because today is going to be more geared toward our wrestling fans in and around the Genesee County area specifically, although my guest at this time is very well known in the tri-state area. One of the true good guys in a very unorthodox genre of entertainment. More importantly, one of my dearest friends, just a class act guy. Shawn Grugel joins me here on this episode of Close to the Heart. Shawn, how we doing, brother?
Doing okay, except for the fact it looks like I'm wearing a bra instead of a tank top.
Hey, man. In this day and age, nobody gives a shit. You know what I mean?
If I'm wearing a bra, someone's putting dollar bills down my pants. That's just the way it's got to be.
Kind of set the stage here for our viewers at home. This idea for this episode really came out just a couple of days ago. Shawn, you came out to my house and we spent a couple of hours. Social distancing was in play here. Full disclosure for anybody that wants to jump on one bandwagon or the other, but that's not what this show is about this week. But you and I had an opportunity to just sit down and just BS for a couple of hours. And, we started reminiscing about our careers and our time in the MWO and things of this nature. And it was you that verbally said what was in my head is this would make a great episode either for the podcast or for here on YouTube. And I'm like, well, let's just stop talking because, we want to get this on camera because you and I, we've known each other for, God, almost 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So we're around the 17-year mark or something like that. Just it's crazy when you think within a blink of an eye, 2 decades has gone just like that.
Right. Especially when we were talking about how many names have actually come and gone out of the Michigan Wrestling Organization. It was, let's face it, my mind isn't as sharp as it used to be, and trying to come up with some of those names. If I couldn't do it, you were doing it. It's like, yeah, I remember that guy.
Yep. Some were here for just a cup of coffee. Other ones have made this their home, their home promotion. But before we get to the wrestling part, tell us a little bit about your childhood, your upbringing, where you grew up, and eventually how you got involved in this crazy world of professional wrestling.
All right. I was born in Pontiac at a hospital that's no longer around. I lived in a place called Drayton Plains till about the time I was 11 years old. Moved out to Holly, Michigan, and back and forth a few places. I pretty much lived in Holly pretty much all my teenage years and my adult life. At one point in time, we were almost neighbors when my wife and I moved to Flint. And, I was raised, my mom and dad. I have, you and I are on 2 different spectrums as far as family goes. And you know this. I have a sister who I barely acknowledge and a brother that a lot of people didn't know that I had, who I hadn't seen since I was 14 years old up until, probably about 10 years ago, and I've only seen him maybe one time since then. So, wrestling-wise, let's see. Well, when I was in high school, I started working for McDonald's, and I was the youngest second assistant manager that McDonald's ever had. The store manager at the time, I very specifically remember his name because I hope One day he looks me up on Facebook, and when I see the name Tom McBroom, and I kid you not, the guy worked at McDonald's, and his name was McBroom. Okay, I told him I wanted to be a professional wrestler, and he told me I was too small. Granted, that was 35 years ago, give or take. Well, let's see, I was 16 when I started there, so and I'm 46 now, so 30 years ago. And he was my first naysayer. And going through high school, I had people telling me I wouldn't be a professional wrestler. And once I got out of high school, I was working for, this will show my age, a place called Funkoland. And, and this guy named Mr. GQ came into the store. That's what he called himself. When he put his name down to reserve a game, it was a WWF game, probably for the Super Nintendo. Instead of putting his legal name down, he literally wrote down Mr. GQ. And I looked at him, I said, yeah. I said, what the hell is this? And he says that he was a manager for Midwest Championship Wrestling. And so I thought it was a joke and found out it was at this place called the Palladium down the Detroit way. And sure enough, it was an independent show. And on that first independent show, you had Sex and Violence, who was Joey Legend, who you might know from the WWF as Just Joe. Mm-hmm. Sexton Hardcastle, who later became Edge. Christian Cage, who obviously was Christian. Rhino Richards. Rhino. The guy wrestled under the name, I believe it was Adam Copeland, which is Edge's real name, but it was actually Test, who was on that show. Yeah. And a few other guys that didn't really make it to the Fed. But that first show, that first match, there was a match between the Alexis Machine and Bloody Bill Scullion. And Bloody Bill Scullion lived up to his name, and he was a bloody mess. It was a match for the Brass Knuckles title and ICW. I'm sorry. And he bled all over me. He hung his head over top of me, bled on my pants, my boots. And I'm like, I'm home. This is what I got to do. Right. And the rest, as they say, is history. I've been wrestling since 96. I broke in. I believe 97 I had my first match. And been a part of the independent scene ever since. So.
Still going?
Off and on, as much as my body will let me.
Right.
So,
very cool. So, during the early part of your career, was it that specific moment where you got bled on that you decided that you really wanted to become part of that type of wrestling, the no holds barred, the hardcore type of wrestling, or did you just kind of fall into it?
The very first match that made me fall in love with wrestling, and you are going to relate to this, was I believe it was January 17th, 1984, Hulk Hogan versus the Iron Sheik for the WWF heavyweight title. Mm-hmm. And actually, that was the very first day we got cable, 84. What led to the hardcore wrestling was Midwest Championship Wrestling, was also known as Insane Championship Wrestling. And the gentleman that trained me, his name was Sweet Daddy Malcolm Monroe. He used to work the Kobo circuit for the original Sheik back in the day. And let me just say, I think I'm one of the last of the how guys were originally trained in the business, okay? And what I mean by that was, when I started going to shows, not everybody could buy a wrestling ring. Not everybody could become a wrestler. It was still a bit of a secret society back then. If you wanted to be a part of it, you actually had to pay your dues and earn your way into the business. So, for example, when I went to that first wrestling show and I went to introduce myself to that promoter, Malcolm Monroe, I says, yeah, I'm looking for Malcolm Monroe. He goes, who's asking? I said, I want to learn to be a wrestler. He says, he's not here. I started coming to the shows, and eventually I got to start working security. And if you ever worked security back in the 90s for ICW, you weren't security. You were a bouncer.
Right.
And a majority of that was defending the wrestlers from Malcolm's family, because he never let his family into the business. He never told his daughter that it was staged. So everything that she saw in the ring, she thought her dad was getting hurt. She thought her brother was getting hurt. So when you went to hold her back, and you're talking about a woman that, Shawn, if you're watching, I'm sorry, but back then she was probably going a good 2 bills, and she'd swing on you and she would knock a man out. Right. So I started doing security, tear down, setup, and what led to the hardcore was, since it was Insane Championship Wrestling, and you're talking the 90s, that's when hardcore was really starting to come to the forefront. And after my first, 5 or 6 matches, they put me in my first hardcore match. Malcolm thought it would be good for me, and it just kind of steamrolled from there. So, did I want to? Yeah, I wanted to do it.
Okay.
So
that's obviously that genre of wrestling, those type of matches, has really solidified your name on the independent scene throughout Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, the tri-state area. Would you say that that's accurate?
Yeah, it was, especially in the 90s. When it started falling off, that's when it started making bookings a little tougher for me.
Sure. All right, well, let's fast forward a little bit. What was it, 2002, 2003, that time period? MWO was in the early stages of the Wednesday night era. And for MWO fans, longtime fans, you know how important that era was for the development of the MWO as a promotion. We had a regular venue. It was every other Wednesday night. You would never think in a million years that a Wednesday night in the small town of Otisville that you would draw any kind of crowd. Well, for the longest time, those were our biggest and hottest crowds. It was around that time that I became introduced to you. And this is how our conversation over the weekend kind of started. We just kind of, started thinking about, the first time we had met, and it was Josh Westfall. He used to be an MWO announcer and commentator. He called himself Zero. He's the one that he's the first one that brought your name up to me. And then it wasn't long after that, lo and behold, here comes Levi Blue. My first introduction to you. What was your first impression on that first day that you came to the organization?
All right, well, let's shoot straight.
Yeah.
When I came to the MWO, it wasn't to watch an MWO show. It was to take your building, essentially. It was to scout your building and see what we can take away from these yarders.
Right.
And when I first arrived there, Westfall had nothing to do with my arrival to the MWO that I'm aware of. I was brought there by a Mr. Mayhem Mike Mundane, Aaron Bedell. It took me 2 days to remember his name. But he was telling me about this group of guys and how they were putting on shows. But he was telling me outrageous stories. Like he was doing all this hardcore stuff, which was at that point in time my forte.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go to this building with every intention of scouting this building because I was expecting to see barbed wire and glass and just stupid people doing stupid things, which I gotta admit, I love watching people hurt themselves. It's one of my guilty pleasures. I love shows like Ridiculousness and stuff like that. Anyway, so I get to the show and I'm watching this, and I'm watching one of the most professionally ran shows I have seen, up to this point in my career. There was no glass tubes. There was no barbed wire. I've seen a lot of talent, potential talent, that given the right guidance could grow this promotion into something else. And like I said, just that little bit of time, it seemed like I was there from the Forest Township Hall days. Let's just skip ahead to the Terry's Lounge days. That was one of the most dramatic changes I have ever seen in any wrestling company I've ever been a part of.
You're certainly talking about two different eras, but you couldn't have the one without the other. Right. Now, we skip to Terry's Lounge. Take the Wednesday night era for what it was. It started. It was a launching pad for a lot of the guys who would make significant contributions to the wrestling scene in Michigan. I mean, maybe not immediately, but over the course of their tenure in the business, they can, a lot of them can trace their roots at the MWO. And I hate, just throwing names out there, but you got, guys like Aaron Orion and Jack Price and, guys that are really making a name for themselves. This is around the time period that they got their start. Terry's Lounge and the Terry's Lounge era, we were talking about it the other day, just how much fun we had. We couldn't wait to get to the building and set up and go through the motions of putting a show together because we had so much talent and everybody was so invested in what we were doing. And you and I, as we moved into Terry's Lounge, we were still kind of feeling each other out, right? Because my experiences with indie guys was not favorable at all. We were treated horribly by individuals who had come in to the company for a cup of coffee, but it was under false pretenses, And I wanted no part of that because all you heard about was all the drama and all the backstabbing and all the chaos that goes on or that can go on in the wrestling business in other promotions and companies and things of this nature. I wanted no part of that, so I didn't even acknowledge anybody else. In my mind, in the way we did things, it was us, and that's all I cared about. And then here you come in, and you are one of the rare exceptions that totally made me change, or I guess my approach, not necessarily how I go about things. Because if you're going to be a dickhead to me, I've got no time for you. But you have made me reevaluate how I approach each situation, and that they are individualized. Not every indie guy can be put under one umbrella.
Right. Well, yeah, I knew you had real hesitations about me because that first day I met you, I believe it was after the show, might have been before the show. It was Westfall that took me to you to introduce me to you, and I remember I came there after. It had to be after the show because I wanted to make a deal with you, and the deal was I had 3 people that I wanted to train. And I came to you, and you were standing there arms crossed, looking down at me because obviously I was shorter than you. And right next to you, you had Bob Breckenridge. Looking down at me because obviously I was shorter than him. And I remember I looked at you. I said, Jason, I got 3 guys I want to train. If you let me train those 3 guys, I will train your roster. And you were hesitant about it. And I think it was the next show, 2 weeks later, I showed up with the 3 people I wanted to train, and I had on my wrestling gear, boots, pads. I think I had biker shorts on at the time.
Yeah.
I don't think I was quite so fat back then. And I remember the roster that you had back then. They took exception to me being there. Whether it was through ridicule or dirty looks, they didn't want me there. And I remember I started training those 3 individuals. And as I started training them, more and more guys started coming to the ring. Now, those 3 people that I wanted to train, they quit. It was like the first or second training session I had with them. They quit. And the guys that were watching me continued to do so. And then I think, was it during that time? Or it had to be Terry's Lounge when we went to David Hill's house and we set up the ring there. And we were doing training in the garage.
That was during Terry's Lounge era.
Okay.
Yeah. We may have started that right at the end of the Otisville run, because it was one right after another. There was no lag time. And I couldn't tell you to this day what the reasoning was that we didn't do Wednesday night wrestling. I don't know if it was, I don't believe it was an issue with the venue itself. I don't know if schedules started to come into play or what the case was. Because, I mean, we worked, people worked, people went to school. Wednesday nights were not ideal. So when we had the opportunity to start doing regular shows at Terry's Lounge, that was a Saturday afternoon time slot, religiously, unless, Gene, God bless his soul, wanted to, move us to a Sunday to try to bring in more crowds for Sunday. But yeah, it was right around that time that Azrael had offered his garage, so we would, take the ring over there, and then you guys would do your sessions over there in between show days.
Hey, it wasn't just us guys. I remember you coming over there and, believe it or not, and I'm going to expose this to the world, the Basher had a fear. Basher didn't like being upside down. And I don't know how long it took us to get you over that, but eventually we got you over that. So,
well, okay, to be fair, jerk. I got literally picked up for a suplex and dropped. I mean, vertical, just let go of. So, when something like that happens and you damn near snap your neck, it kind of makes you reevaluate what you're going to allow people to do. But to your credit and Dave's credit, it was you guys that got me over.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yep. Actually, we helped quite a few people. We had Jade. Jade didn't like the flip. We got her over that fear. Yeah, we had quite a few guys that would come out to that garage and train. A lot of guys would just come out there and sit on the couch and watch us train. But Jason Chaos. But for the most part, that started a lot of guys on their paths. Now, I remember I was talking to a lot of guys about training. And so Night Shift, I remember he went to a wrestling school in Detroit, followed by Biohazard, who went down there. And then we had a school open up close to us, and we had a few guys depart for that one as well. Now, I'm not sure how much training they got there, some of them. But You know, they all went out and made their own paths, which I guess in one sense it was good because I told you that I would train the roster, but in another sense it wasn't in the way that I originally intended. So
Right. Right. Well, from behind the scenes to things that we've done in front of the camera or in the ring, and that takes us to and I said this the other day, having looked back on over 25 years at this point and all the different people that I've worked with, worked against, had rivalries with in the ring. You know, there is less than a handful that stand out. But the Power Trip, the original run of the Power Trip, was one of, I mean, like top 2 or 3 times in my career. And it would not have happened and it would not have worked if all of the stars were not in alignment. And I don't, I mean, it was like a perfect storm, right? Because we took real life tension, a real life perceived rivalry, more so among the other boys in the locker room than me and you. There was just hesitation there, at least on my part, And I specifically remember the phone call that you and I had as we started to lay the groundwork of what would become the Power Trip. What if we did this? And it would require me turning heel, full-blown heel, for the first time in my career. I had been a bad guy for a brief amount of time, as this was, it was right around that era because we were making Biohazard the next big star. And I would work with Biohazard at Tricker Slam, and he would become the MWO champion. But this really set my whole career down a different path. And it was, do you remember that phone call? Do you remember the early stages of the planning of what would become the Power Trip?
I don't remember a whole lot of specifics. I remember saying I've never seen this done before. Because let's face it, we were the NWO before the NWO, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to work the boys. I didn't want them to know what was happening.
Right.
And I remember the tension stemmed from, I think I swore in the ring, and I was reprimanded for swearing. I think that's what it was.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, you dropped an F-bomb or something.
Right.
It was something, and you got time off.
Yep.
Take a couple of shows off. We don't do that shit here. Oxymoronic, looking back. But,
right.
Yeah, so
that's what it was. The fact that it was in a bar, and we should be cussing. We're in a bar setting.
Right.
And I remember kind of laying the groundwork for it and how I was going to come in from the front door and start yelling at you when you were in the ring cutting a promo or a match or something. And we were going to throw shots at each other.
Yeah.
And, yeah, so that's kind of what I remember from the phone calls. Is vary from what you remember?
We wound up talking on the phone because the boys in the back started running their mouths among each other. And it eventually got to my brother, who in turn told me, hey, allegedly, there's a lot of shit being said because Shawn's upset because you gave him time off and now he's mad and blah, blah, blah. And you know how it is when you start a pebble at the top of a mountain, and by the time it gets down to the bottom of the mountain, it's this big ass boulder, and it blows out of proportion. So we wound up using that as the catalyst
Okay.
because you had called me to squash any heat because it had gotten back to you. It seems to me that's what the premise was.
Okay.
Just to make sure that you and I were cool. And more often than not, anything that happens on business time is business, and personal time is personal. But you laid this scenario out, and as you were laying it out, I could picture it. I could picture what you were telling me, the atmosphere, the surrounding area around the ring, blah blah blah. So when time came, when that day came, because I believe somebody said something that you were coming to Terry's on a show day, and there was going to be some sort of confrontation. I think that's the word that set my brother off, was the word confrontation. You ain't
Okay.
going to confront nobody. So when everything started to materialize, and you had come in through the front door, and we were yelling at each other. We weren't even on the microphones, I don't think. We were just yelling loud enough for everybody. Dude, it was sold out at the curtain. So which is exactly how we wanted it done, right? Because when you and I met, dude, it wasn't very long before the first two people were hitting the ring, and then followed by the rest of the roster. I mean, it could not have worked out any better than it did, because it just took off a life unto its own.
Oh yeah, we had to break up. I remember. I think it was Joe Snyder that punched me in the face. I'm pretty sure it was him.
Awesome.
I remember being drug outside, and I remember carrying the whole act, like as I was walking down Fenton Road, because I mean it just turned into a big deal. Yeah. Now I don't know if we let the boys in after. I think we did let the boys in after that,
right?
So that I wouldn't get killed when I came back to the next show,
Right.
because they were like, let's face it, your brother was trying to get Marauders brass knuckles because he was going to kick my ass.
That's one of the most famous stories we have, is in Gross Power, surprisingly, probably realizing what frame of mind that Jeff was in at that point, knowing, because we had all worked together for so long prior to the Terry's Lounge era. He knew if Jeff got a hold of those things, he was looking to do some damage with them. So, to Todd's credit, he's partially, responsible for saving your life that day.
I saved my life, Todd. I kind of enjoyed these last 20 years. Oh man. Yeah, but I think one of the things that set us apart was, number one, from Forest Township Hall to Terry's Lounge, we started selling that bitch out. I remember standing room only. We were on one side of the bar, and people were lined up all the way up to the bar to watch the shows. But we had something magical, because we had come up with the concept of turning people without telling the roster.
Yeah.
So no one knew who was going to join the power trip next. And when Biohazard joined the power trip for the first time, holy God, you would have thought the world blew up. I mean, that was a mind blower for a lot of people, between him and Randy Schilling.
I was just going to say that. Randy Schilling. Dude, those first few months of our run, going to, we formed in September of 94, or 2004. The company was born in September of 94. Power Trip formed in September of 2004. Okay. By the time we got to Christmas Clash, and I think we were fighting for the tag team titles on that show, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to go back. If Andrew Steele was here, he would be able to tell us.
Oh, yeah. And what I was wearing and what I drank that night and everything else.
But Randy Schilling was such a beloved referee, right? He was, I mean, everybody knew who he was. So much respect behind the scenes, so much respect among the fans. When he turned and became part of the power trip, I think he is another reason why we had such immediate heat. I mean,
Yeah.
aside from that, we swerved everybody, but we got the beloved, the cherished Randy Schilling to come to the dark side. And what did we do when he got there? Treated him like shit.
Absolute shit. Shine our belts, Randy. And he would. He'd get down on his knees to shine the belts. Do you remember that? And,
Yes.
and the crowd would be so irate at the fact that he was doing that for us.
And still defending us. These are the greatest tag team in the history of the wrestling business.
Right.
Go back down to shining.
Yeah. And, you know, what made us different, too, is the guys then, they were starting to come into wearing wrestling gear. We were starting to see singlets and boots and pads. And what do we show up in? Suits and ties.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, I think the only resemblance of real wrestling gear that we had on were elbow pads and wrist tape, because we had the suit jackets. Then underneath we had the shirts with our sleeves cut off, and then the ties, and it was, man, it was perfect. It was so perfect.
And you picked the music, and you picked the music for this. The Marilyn Manson, was it Reach Out and Touch Jesus? Personal Jesus, yeah. That music was spot on too. So.
Became iconic. I mean, to this day, I have fans who tell me anytime they come across that song, they think that their first thought is the power trip.
Right.
And you know why that is because we never changed our music.
No.
You know, there was no need to change our music 10, 11, 12 times. We picked one song. So every time the people heard those opening chords, they're like, crap, business is about to pick up. The power trip is coming, you know, in some way, shape, or form. So,
you know, there was a point I was starting to get sick of that song. But, you know what was cool about the power trip, though? We were the bad guys that everyone loved, it seemed like. Right. I mean, I was like Curly of the Three Stooges, you know what I'm saying? I would do stupid, like, I remember I was wrestling Jamie Malibu, and I had to the ring announcer announced me as Levi Blue, and I came out on a scooter and board shorts, and I had a mullet wig, and people would scream, dude, or my tie, and I'd scream, dude. And then we were wrestling, I think it was Kamash and someone else, and people used to tease them because they looked like Mortal Kombat. And I came out as Kung Fu Levi Blue, had the black karate gi on with the big giant afro. And you were the one that announced me. You were breaking when you announced me for that one, too. So, I mean, we were like a combination of the NWO and DX. Before it was NWO and DX.
Right.
That's made it so cool, I thought. So
yeah, because we literally took the company over. You know, WrestleRama in 2005, it was in Davison at the VFW Hall, and it was the Power Trip presents WrestleRama 11. And we were in the co-main event. We had two main events. You and I wrestled my brother and Azrael in that match. And man, I look back when I think of my WrestleRama matches, that's in my top 5 because there was such natural chemistry between all four of us. You and Dave were very good friends at that point. You know, Jeff and I were brothers. Me and Dave had a mutual admiration and respect for one another. So everything clicked. And it was one of our favorite matches during our initial run. It really was. But I mean, we overtook the entire company almost to the point at nauseum. However, the one cool thing that came out of that is you and I gained two pretty awesome people as fans and as friends, and I'm referring to Generals Dave and Tattoo.
Yeah.
Because a lot of what you and I would talk about is how would Generals Dave and Tattoo respond to this?
Right.
How would they react to that? Are they going to buy it if we did this? So, I don't even think they really knew that they had that much influence on us personally and professionally, because, man, they went to the online store and bought our merchandise, and they were at every single show. And even after the show, we would hang out with them and drink a few dozen beers and a couple of other shots and everything like that. But they too, and Dave would actually, become part of the Power Trip faction. When we had Dustin Devine and Damon Gray had joined, which was a big deal because Damon Gray had never joined any faction during his career, and he prided himself on that up until the day that he joined the Power Trip. And that was another shocking moment because we played on the fact that he had never, ever been a part officially of a faction. So when we got him to, join the dark side, as it was, I have a picture. It's all of us outside of Terry's Lounge, and Dave has, I believe it's the XBW title that we were showcasing there for a minute.
Yep.
So, I mean, in your opinion, because you have a different set of eyeballs than I do, how important was Generals Dave and Tattoo?
Well, Dave, Dave started. I'm going to go way back real quick. Dave heard about me from CJ Cashmere.
Okay.
CJ Cashmere told him that Levi Blue was going to start wrestling for the MWO. Dave is a very knowledgeable, I don't even want to call him a wrestling fan. He is an encyclopedia of old school wrestling knowledge. He is so smart about the business. There isn't too many others who I would say that about. But Dave is one of those guys. Anyway, he knew about me from wrestling on the indies, and that's why he started coming. Now, when him and Tattoo started coming to the Terry's Lounge shows, I'm sorry, the way that they would, when the crowd was cheering for the other team, and Dave and Tattoo would cheer for us and get the crowd onto them, and then more onto us, because I think at that point the crowd started to see that we were turning them, and they didn't want that to happen. And Dave and Tattoo, whether we acknowledge it or not, then they were a major player in the Power Trip. Without them, and despite the fact that they were buying our merchandise, and despite the fact that they were, sporting the Power Trip hats and coming to every shows, they played into us. So, like, I would cut a promo and I'd be like, "That guy wants to buy me a beer," and I would point to General's Day. And you know this for a fact. Next thing you know, I would have 6 beers in my hand from random people buying me beers because they were going to show that guy up. Because, if he's going to be friends with the Power Trip, then we're going to be friends with the Power Trip. And it was the weirdest dichotomy as it goes for the fans, because I think Dave and Tattoo, unbeknownst to them, they turned those fans to Power Trip fans.
Yeah.
So, and let's face it, Dave literally, he's not my friend. He's my brother anymore. We still hang out and everything together. He is literally the only Mark that I've ever let come into my life like I have Dave. And Dave is an incredible brother. So
he really is. I'll tell you real quick. You know, I've heard from him through a text message or a comment on Facebook or what have you at least once or twice a week since my brother passed away. And it just goes to show how special of a person that he is, because I mean he genuinely cares about people. There needs to be more Dave Linders in the world, in my opinion, because
yeah.
he's just a class act guy.
And unfortunately, I have lost all contact with Craig Hudson, tattoo.
Yeah.
The guy is awesome, one of the most soft-spoken, gentle giants you'd ever want to meet. And I wish to God that I could hang out with him despite this pandemic. Okay,
Right.
I mean, yeah, social distancing and everything else, but you know, apparently he's been pretty sick. I got to see him at some point in time. But Craig was just one of those guys. When I was inducted into the MWO Hall of Fame, who were the first two people that wanted to be there? It was
Yeah.
Dave and Craig. So
yeah, and I'll tell you, their loyalty to our brand is a main reason why they were the first inductees into our super fan wing into the MWO Hall of Fame, because I couldn't think of two better guys. You know, they just fantastic people. Now, all good things come to an end. So going into 2006, the unthinkable happens. The power trip breaks up.
is that when I got
Blue.
blonde hair?
Huh?
Is that when I got blonde hair?
Yep.
Son of a bitch.
Levi Blue becomes the Michigan Wrestling Organization champion at the Bunkhouse Brawl that year. I won Bunkhouse Brawl that year. So what happened? Got Blue versus Bash at WrestleRama 12. And, dude, to this day, I don't think I put more in-ring preparation for any WrestleRama match of that magnitude than I did for that one with you. We set the ring up in your backyard when you lived diagonal from me in Flint.
Right.
And like the week before going up to the show was at Bentley High School, or the middle school, one of the schools there. And I mean, for days we ran through drills. We did this, we did that. And because I put so much pressure, I didn't want to book that match. I'll be 100% honest with you. I did not want to book. I wanted to put somebody else in the challenger spot to work with you, because I was so nervous initially that, because you and I had never really worked a one-on-one match, and
No.
I didn't want to stink the ring up. I didn't want you to be disappointed. I didn't want to make you look bad, or I had psyched myself out so much as we were when we got the Bunkhouse Brawl and we had to put the pieces in order, have you win the title, and then I wound up winning the Bunkhouse Brawl match. It was nerve-wracking, brother. I mean, it really was, because I didn't want to let you down, because I know you had put so much of your reputation on the line by coming to this little shitty promotion, but you adopted it as a home venue. You know, you could tell over time, the more time you spend here, the more it meant something to you. So when we got to WrestleRama 12, I was just like, man, if I don't screw up once, I'll at least be happy with that. I mean, we knew what the ending was, and we knew how that was going to transition further down the storyline. But do you have any memories of headlining WrestleRama 12? Because at that point, dude, and I don't even know if you realize that, for our company, that would have been the equivalent of Hogan Flair. at that point?
I was nervous about that match. To tell you, I can remember everything that happened in that match. I would absolutely 110% be lying to you because I had such tunnel vision going into that match. That's all I could think about was not screwing up because I had the same feelings you did. I didn't want to let you down. I didn't want to screw up. And since I was holding the belt, I didn't want to tarnish what we were building in the company.
Right.
And I had blonde hair. That's when I was with Bob Breckenridge, right? We were doing the Cash Wrestling deal.
Yeah.
And that was going pretty hot there for a while, too. And it really helped establish the fact that I was a bigger asshole than you. And the crowd was really popping for you at that point because you were right. We did have that whole Hogan-Flair dichotomy set for that match, and Jason, I'll be honest with you, I don't even remember how that match ended because I was just thankful that it was over with at that point, and it was as good as it was. But
I couldn't. It was a screw job finish. I know that.
Okay.
I feel like you rolled me up and hooked the tights because it wasn't like a big finishing move.
Right.
It was some sort of screw job because we were setting the rematch up for the next show at Terry's Lounge.
Right. Yeah, I remember we wanted to bring all those people from Bentley with us over to Terry's. I remember that was the whole psychology we used in that match was we're not ending it here, we're going to Terry's.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and we had it written to where that's where I would win the title was at Terry's instead of WrestleRama, and there were several guys who came because we didn't keep it secret as to what we were going to do. We laid out, okay, this is happening at Rama, this is what's happening for the next 3 shows after the fact. So everybody was on one page. They knew where each other was going and stuff like that. And I had a few guys come up to me and be like, why are you losing at WrestleRama? WrestleRama is your show, and like they talk about the Undertaker is to WrestleMania, right? Because he's like this iconic figure. Look, to me that doesn't matter. It's telling the story, and just as important, if not more so, get those people, those 250 to 300 people that are coming to the school for this fundraiser to come to Terry's and see what happens in the next chapter of the story.
That's what it was. I remember trying to make that point with those guys. It's not about you or it's not about me. It's about the fans and the show. And it's about the business and the end result. It's, for an example, I remember there was heat because I think it was at a Tricker Slam match. I was set to go over Mike Reaver for the Extreme title.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to call him out. Josh Orr, Bubba Blackwell, was so upset that I was going to go over for the title. I remember he left the building upset and was going to quit. And I had to go outside and explain to him about the belt just being a prop. Right?
Right.
Well, I remember there was still heat from that. So what did we set up to do? Jade, the first female MWO champion. I put her over. Here I was, Mr. Hardcore out on the independent scene, Levi Blue, and I just jobbed out to a girl and gave her the title. What does that show you guys? And you know what? No disrespect to Amy, because she was more than deserving of that title at that point in time. She had worked her ass off in training, and she actually held that title with so much, she defended that title with so much respect. You gotta love her, you know what I'm saying? So, guys don't realize it's about the end result and not about the moment.
Right.
So,
Yeah, dude. I mean, storylines are stories, and every story has a chapter. You know, you can't have all the cool stuff in the beginning because you got nothing to look forward to by the time you get to the end of that particular story, and then you wind up feeling like you wasted your time investing your time into it, and you're not satisfied. You know,
Right.
it doesn't have to be overly complicated. So after the first couple of incarnations of the power trip, um, you wound up taking something of a hiatus for a little bit. Pop in every now and again, but you weren't a full time roster member. You
Right.
were doing your your other endeavors, your other opportunities, things of that nature. But coming out of WrestleRama, what do we say, 19? And we started going into the city market. The
Yeah.
We had that I believe that first show after Rama that year was our first show at the city market indoors. You know, where Dave Stacy had us all set up. Such a phenomenal run, such a great run, and we kicked it off with the power trip when when you compare the two, the post Rama 19 version and the original version, do you have a particular favorite? Because I think in my opinion, the second coming of the power trip is oftentimes kind of overlooked. But
Right.
when you go back and look at it, like, man, we did some pretty cool stuff. We worked with some pretty cool tag teams.
We did. And uh, see, here's the thing. The first power trip for me, it was a party. I mean,
Yeah,
it really
got that
was a
right.
party. Yeah. I mean, I'll go ahead and I'll shoot straight. I was doing a lot of drinking. I mean, it was Terry's Lounge. And let's face it, Jason, I got you to do a few drinky poos yourself. And, so some of those matches, some of those matches, someone will say to me, "Hey, do you remember this match or do you remember that match?" And I'll look at them cross-eyed and go, "I'm sorry, I can't. I remember moments."
Yeah,
Now, the city market shows, because I was, for lack of a better term, sober, I had a lot of fun with those shows because I remember a lot of those shows. And one of those moments in particular was when we declared the power trip as the people's heroes.
yeah,
And the whole explanation was so stupid about how without bad guys, there could be no good. So because we're bad, we're good because we're helping the good guys. So that makes us their heroes. And it was so over the top ridiculous, and people hated us for it. And we talked about it the other day, but one of my favorite moments was Andrew Jones's son, Connor. Huge MWO fan. I know his favorite wrestler was Apocalypse. I know I'm right there. Right, Connor? I know I'm your favorite wrestler too now. But regardless, I was wrestling the Blue Marvel. And I remember Connor booing the hell out of me. And he couldn't have been no older than 7 or 8 years old. And I looked at him. I said, "If you keep booing me, I'm going to punch the Blue Marvel right in the face, and it's going to be your fault. Because I said this, and if I don't do it, I'm a liar. And heroes aren't liars." And he booed me, and I punched the Blue Marvel in the face. I looked right at him. I pointed right at him. I said, "That was your fault." And you could just see him go white. And at the end of the match, I think I lost to the Blue Marvel. I think I got disqualified.
yeah, I believe so.
Because I took the Blue Marvel to the outside, and Connor was sitting there front row center, and I gave the Blue Marvel a pile driver right on the floor, right in front of Connor. And as I'm sitting there with the Blue Marvel still between my legs, I looked right at Connor. I says, "This was your fault." So, so here we are, 10, 12, 14 years later, And I'll still go to There and Back Again Toys, and if Connor's in there, he will just look at me, shake his head, and walk away from me. And I got to chase him down, telling him, Connor, I know you're happy to see me. I know I'm your favorite wrestler. You don't have to act like this at all. He gets absolutely disgusted. And the best part about it is his dad absolutely loves it when I give Connor hell. So,
right. Right. Hey, I mean that hits close to home too, because I don't think at this point you have cracked Austin's top 50 favorite wrestlers list.
hey, last time I checked, I think I was like his number 8. You can ask him.
It fluctuates. It goes up and down. It goes
does.
up and down.
But to my point with Connor,
yeah,
to have that kind of influence all these years later, look how many years it's been since we've been to the city market.
right.
To have that kind of influence that we had as the power trip, and he still acknowledges it, that tells you we were doing something right.
You're absolutely right. And it was a fun time. I mean, you and I have always been the nucleus of the power trip. I mean, when you look over the course of our history, and we should probably do a documentary of some sort on the power trip because it made that much impact. But I mean, you look at guys like Biohazard, Jerry Draven, Randy Schilling, So Fine, Dustin Divine at that point, Mark Ruff. The second coming of the power trip originally was just, it was back to me and you, but we brought Bob Breckenridge in to make that trio because, I mean, facts are facts. Bob Breckenridge is in the top 5 most incredible heels in the history of our organization.
He doesn't have to. He looks like an asshole. He doesn't have to do a damn thing. Just
yeah, but when he does,
I mean,
he's an uber heel, but it worked. It worked and it clicked. And then when we decided that we needed to expand, we brought my brother in and we brought Michael Reaver in.
Right.
Two iconic names in the history of our company. And as I look up on my bulletin board, I have this thing from, where am I at here? WrestleRama 22.
Oh yeah.
You see that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not my biggest shining moment when I got pinned by Simon Page, but yeah.
That's a story for another time. We're talking happy thoughts here. We're talking happy thoughts.
It was my Achilles heel with that schoolboy or whatever it was.
It's like a damn turtle. You can't get up.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Thanks. Call me fat without calling me fat. I appreciate that.
I can't kick out the shit either. So yeah. Anyway, dude, when you look back on your time here, and I realize your career is so much more experienced than what I've done. You've been in several different promotions. You've worked with the Who's Who. You've been on cards with the Who's Who. But specifically speaking about the MWO, do you have a favorite opponent? Do you have a favorite memory? Take all the power trip stuff away, because we just spent like a half an hour talking about the power trip. But well, I guess in that time, period too. But is there anything about your time here that stands out to you as your most proud or your most favorite, whether it be in the ring or behind the scenes?
Okay, we'll get to the opponent in a minute. My biggest, proudest thing is helping be a part of watching something grow from. I don't want to make it sound like I'm belittling the beginnings of the MWO. I'm really not, okay? But when I first got to the MWO, there was a shit ton of talent, but none of it cultivated the right way. You guys had something that resembled a ring. You know, you yourself, I mean, literally, for doing what you did to become the type of promoter and booker that you became, you literally are the epitome of professionalism. I cannot stress that enough. Okay, but watching the humble beginnings of what I saw at Forest Township Hall to watching what became at the Birch Run Expo Center was incredible. Watching guys like Jack Price, who was as big around as this bottle when he first started, and growing into the Death Threat Army case that he is now. Seeing Aaron Orion, that chubby little blonde kid who went on to the military to serve our country and then come out and appear on a WWE Raw show. You know, seeing the achievements of others makes me the most proud. You know, as far as a favorite opponent goes, you know, and I'm not saying this because of circumstances. I loved wrestling your brother. And the only reason why I did is because he always seemed real excited about wrestling with me. And we would always have those moves. Like, he would always, gotta make sure you give me the Bulldog Slam. All right, you gotta make sure you give me the PF5. You know, and he was just so much fun, and he was always so excited about being in the ring. You know, I love working with your brother. I love working with Jack Price. I like working with the whole, what do they call them? The HD guys.
Yeah.
Sniper, Sweeney,
Draven.
You know, I like that whole genre of guys at that point in time. You know, probably one of the biggest things I'm most proud of is I was, and I've said this to you before, the MWO Heavyweight Championship was my first heavyweight championship I ever held. And I won that against Chris Clayton, who I think was one of the best talents that was ever on the MWO roster.
Could not agree more.
Yeah, I'm not saying, you know, let's just go with the Chris Benoit syndrome. What happened outside the ring happened outside the ring. Inside the ring, Chris Clayton was fire. Yeah. I mean, he was money. And I love wrestling with you because we couldn't. We mesh so well when we're in there. The chemistry is so good. You know, I'm not just saying that because we're, you know, doing this thing here and we're buddies. You know, watching you when we first got together, how you didn't trust me, which was fine. I wouldn't have trusted me either. To letting me help you get over your fear of going upside down. And then trusting me with the whole power trip deal. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't have made the strides that we did together. Right. So, and then the last thing I keep looking over, I still got my MWO Heavyweight or my MWO Hall of Fame awards over here. I posted it on Jeff's page. I still got all my achievement medals. I still have I have my MWO Newcomer of the Year award sitting. You know, at that point, I think I was in, 7, 8 years, and I got Newcomer of the Year award, you know. So I had a lot of people give me a lot of shit. You know, I'm sure you're going to put a PG-14 rating on your close.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I can throw a big rated M up there if I need be, but go ahead.
Look, just because I'm wearing a bra doesn't mean I'm going to go topless, okay? But I'll give you a particular instance. I don't think I've ever told you this before. I was wrestling for a show, and the head referee for that show was John Pee Wee Moore. And I don't know if you're familiar with that name or not. No. John Pee Wee Moore was, at one point in time, the head referee for the original ECW. Okay. He was, if you watch Sabu, I believe it was Sabu versus I don't know, was it the Sandman, maybe Tommy Dreamer? One of the two, where Sabu took the barbed wire, wrapped it around his arm, he ripped his arm completely open.
Yeah.
Pee Wee Moore was the referee for that match.
Okay.
And he pulled me aside. He asked me, he goes, "What the fuck are you doing? What are you talking about?" He says, "I was scrolling through TV and I saw you on this MWO bullshit. What's that all about?" I says, I wrestle for the MWO. "Well, if you're going to wrestle for the MWO, you can't wrestle here anymore." "Okay. See you later. I'll wrestle with the MWO." It's family. At that point in time, no amount of shit that anyone could sling at me was going to stick to me, because I knew what I was doing, helping out the way I was, trying to get guys motivated to get trained, trying to do the right things was the right thing to do. And fuck anyone else that told me I was wrong.
So it's a pretty powerful statement, and I wasn't expecting that, so I don't know how to respond to it, other than, thank you. I mean, but that doesn't even seem right, but I mean, that's incredible, Shawn, and it means the world to me. It really does.
That's, my heartfelt feelings, man. So you guys, not to take away from what I just said, but the guys you got on your roster now, I want to get to know these guys. I want to be able to help them the way I helped out guys in the past. I just want them to lay their trust in me like you did in me all them years ago, so I can help them achieve whatever goals and dreams they want to achieve. Because let's face it, I'm 26 years old. I don't know how much longer I can do this. So,
right. Well, as we wrap up here on this episode, I mean, in all reality, we could be here for hours, so we'll title this the Power Trip Chronicles Chapter 1 or something like that. But is there anything you want to put out there? I mean, anything you want to plug? Any kind of activities that you got going on? Because I had mentioned on one of my earlier podcasts about, and this was right as the pandemic was really starting to take hold of our area, the cancellation of your Titanic event that you had booked at the Holly Library. Do you have plans to reschedule that?
I won't know until, not going to keep it political. I won't know until Governor Whitmer, loosens restrictions, the libraries opens up, and this, that, and the other. You and your Klaus the Heart up in Frankenmuth was really the one that inspired me to go ahead and even attempt to set up a symposium, so to speak, to speak on the Titanic. No, people watching, it isn't the Titanic movie. No.
We're not doing a watch along here, people.
I like Celine Dion as much as the next guy, but Jack and Rose, they didn't exist. No. I do have a love for the Titanic, but there's a lot of things that a lot of people don't know about me. I'm a photographer. A Titanic historian. I got a son in the Army. There's just different things about me that I've never really brought to light to a lot of people. And I'd almost rather them keep thinking I'm Levi the asshole instead of Levi the historian, because that's just the way I am, until social distancing becomes a thing of the past and we don't have to wear these masks anymore. I'm not going to make any long-range plans, but don't know how many people you got who watch Close to the Heart. I'm sure you got many, so I'm going to put this out there. Let's kill the curve. Let's stay at home. Wear your masks, and let's just get through this together, because once we're done, there's no doubt in my mind, especially at this point, you could see the power trip one more time.
You never know. You never say never.
That's right.
Well, that's about it. As perfect of a way to end this episode. Could not have written it any better. In fact, I don't even have any notes. This was just you and I kind of bullshitting here for the last hour and 15 minutes, or however long it's been. But Shawn Grugel, man, we talked a little bit about it over the weekend. I just want to take this opportunity to just let you know how much I appreciate you on so many levels, personal, professional, just a $1 million dude. And I know in my heart of hearts that on the days that I need something done or I need somebody to rely on, I know you're on that short list, very short list. So thank you for everything that you have done for me personally and professionally.
Short list. Another short joke. Bad jokes. I got them.
Well, I just can't do nothing right now.
Hey, man, I appreciate you having me on your show. I really do. It was, I don't even consider this like a show. It was kind of like a bullshit session, and
right.
I really enjoyed it. So,
the only difference is that you'll be able to go back on YouTube and watch our bullshit sessions. That's actually kind of a cool name for a show. So we'll figure out that later on down the line. Well, he is Shawn Grugel, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for taking time out of your day to watch this episode. We certainly hope you had as much fun watching it as we did recording it, because it's just two longtime friends talking about things that mean something to us and have been a significant part of our lives. We certainly encourage you to hit the subscribe button if you have not done so, and check out the Close to the Heart podcast. You can find it on Spotify and Anchor.fm. Until next time, I am Jason Klaus. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time right here on Close to the Heart.
Take care.